The Buckeyes keep putting numerous defensive backs into the NFL. We just got done talking about one of Marshawn Lattimore, continuing our Buckeye road trip around the NFL. Today is not about another episode about Lattimore. It's about Bradley Roby. Second year with the Saints. Last year was his first year with the New Orleans Saints. Had a little interesting introduction to the Saints, and Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints and the Saints Wire is back with us to discuss what Roby did last year and what we can expect from him in the upcoming season. Ross, will this man make a mark in New Orleans?
I got to tell you, listen, Bradley Roby has a lot of versatility. There's a lot of different ways that he can impact the team, right? You can play outside, you can play inside. You can kind of do whatever you want with him. The issue is that the Saints defensive back room is so loaded right now that it's going to be tough for him to really find his spot. I think he'll make a roster spot, but it's going to be tough for him to find his impact spot. So where he really ends up making an impact on this team, where he can make his mark on the team, is if there's an injury ahead of him or anything like that, and he has to step in. Then all of a sudden you're taking, if you're the New Orleans Saints, you're going from a starter to a bona fide starter in Bradley Roby, a bona fide NFL starter at corner that can end up being your depth piece, which is a pretty unique situation to be in for the Saints.
Outside corner or inside corner? What's the best fit for him?
Yes.
Okay. I like it. Alrighty.
No, that's really like what it is for him, right? Like last year, if you look at his snap counts from last year, in terms of total places where he played last season, 14% at defensive right corner, 28% at defensive left corner, but 18% in the slot. So it was the second most populated spot, was actually playing nickel corner and all. And so you have right now CJ Gardner-Johnson, who's the expected starter in the nickel corner, one of the better nickel corners in the NFL, one of the better trash talkers in the NFL as well. A lot of fun to watch, a lot of fun to cover. But then you have Bradley Roby, who's kind of immediately right behind him as the backup nickel corner, but can also be a really valuable outside corner as well. The Saints for so long had guys like PJ Williams and Patrick Robinson, who are fantastic backup slot. And then PJ Williams turned into a really fantastic backup safety as well. But if you had to put one of those guys out on the outside, then all of a sudden you had some concern, a little bit of a liability. With Bradley Roby as your depth piece, that's not the case.
We have Lattimore on one side. Who's the possible other starting corner that Bradley Roby might not be opposite the other Buckeye playing corner for the Saints?
Yeah, the guy that bounced them last year would be Paulson Adebo. Last year, the Saints traded for...
Wait a minute. Wasn't that a rookie? Isn't that guy a rookie? So you're telling me that a vet got knocked out by a rookie? That ain't right.
It was Tekashi 6ix9ine, right? Like Paulson Adebo said, stupid, I'm not even going to let you have the chance. Because what happened was that Bradley Roby was traded from the Houston Texans over the course of the offseason before the draft. The Saints traded a future, which was actually this year's third round selection. Then in 2021, they drafted my favorite cornerback prospect in that class, which was Paulson Adebo out of Stanford, also in the third round. So there was no real compensation difference between the two players. You traded a third round pick to get one. You used a third round pick to draft the other. So what happened was basically Paulson Adebo ended up getting the start week 1 because Bradley Roby had a suspension to serve. And the Saints knew that before they traded for him. So Paulson Adebo comes in, he goes up against Aaron Rodgers, holds it down opposite Marshawn Lattimore, gets an interception in the red zone, ends up forcing like a less than 50% completion percentage, a very low quarterback rating, and has this huge game, and then basically never relinquished that spot over the course of the 2021 season. So that's what forced Bradley Roby into more of this kind of depth versatility piece, which is still something that works out really well for him, but maybe a little bit different than what the original plan was when they traded to grab him.
What's his contract looking like right now, Bradley Roby's? How much time does he have left on that?
So he has a couple of different things. And basically what happened was that the Saints ended up restructuring his contract and kind of doing a contract extension at the same time this offseason. So he was walking into 2022 with like a $10.1 million base salary that was completely non-guaranteed going into 2022. So what the Saints did was that they restructured that contract. They ended up extending him basically for, I would say, 2 more seasons. So right now his cap hit is only at like $3.2 million, or excuse me, his cap hit's only at $1.7 million, but he still has about $10 million left to make. So they converted a bunch of that to a signing bonus, gave him a bunch of voidable ghost years and stuff like that. But then they really gave him an extension to keep him in from 2022 and 2023. So those would be the years that I would look at. And there's guaranteed money now in both of those years, which he didn't have before. There's a good chance that he's actually on the New Orleans Saints roster until he's 32 when he hits, 2024. But the dead cap hit going into 2023 isn't so much that they might, that they wouldn't be comfortable moving on from him at the end of this year. If they needed to, they could also move on from him before this season now that it's post June 1. But I think that the value in terms of what he brings and looking at his contract structure, the payment versus value of what he brings in 2022, they match up. So I think he'll make the roster in 2022.
And I bring that up because he's kind of venturing into that NFL journeyman or almost journeyman stage in his career. The age you mentioned, he was in Denver, got drafted by Denver, number 31st pick overall in the 2014 draft, was there, won a Super Bowl, was there for, I believe, 5 years, then 2 years in Houston. That was, I'm going to be delicate. There are kids listening. That was a hot mess. But now he's in New Orleans. Now, that was via trade, but now we know when you get up there, especially at that position at corner, especially with how the youth are being developed at that receiver position, you might want to get a younger guy in there, fresher legs, a little bit more nimbler, more flexible, not needing to go to the trainer after everything happens. You want those younger guys in there. So I'm asking about that because not only do I want him to play well this upcoming season, I want him to play in New Orleans because, one, I like the connection, Buckeyes in New Orleans, but Ross, I like talking to you. And I hopefully get to do this again next year with you and Bradley Roby next year in the offseason.
Me too, man.
He's at that stage where that journeyman tag might be on him, not because he can't be a good player on the field. I still think he has good football to play, but his age, man. Those years, that wear and tear, that wears on your body. That's why I'm bringing up the contract because, honestly, we're talking about this upcoming season. But you mentioned June 1. He might not even be on New Orleans in the fall because of the age, and they might find somebody a little bit younger to put and replace him with.
It's possible. They did draft cornerback Alontae Taylor out of Tennessee in the second round of this year's draft. But again, I think that, Alontae Taylor ends up coming in, maybe competing a little bit with Paulson Adebo, but he's going to be mostly, a core special teamer. He's going to be the guy opposite JT Gray as a gunner on the special teams unit. And so I think that you still have a carved out role for Bradley Roby. And if you look at the alternatives in terms of the guys that would end up standing up ahead of Bradley Roby, it's guys like Vincent Gray and like a lot of undrafted free agent rookies, a lot of very young and unproven talent. So at the top of the cornerback spot, you've got guys like Marshawn Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, and Bradley Roby. And then after that, if you want to, you could cycle PJ Williams into there as well, but he's been playing a lot more safety here recently. CJ Gardner-Johnson's a nickel corner, but he's designated as a safety. It's really like the top of your cornerback spots or the top of your quarterback depth chart is set for the most part. And I think Bradley Roby is a part of that. And because he was willing to take the contract restructure and the extension, I think that helps because we know that the New Orleans Saints, they really take a look at what's your role versus how much are they paying that player. And if that role is less than what they feel the contract value is, they will move on from that player. It's what happened with Latavius Murray last year. And so Bradley Roby taking the contract restructure tells you that they clearly identified to him, here's what we believe your role is, and here's what we believe you should be paid for that. And it looked like Bradley Roby and his representation were smart enough to say, we agree. No problem. And then they stuck around in New Orleans, at least hopefully for another year after this one.
Ross, last thing for you here pretty quickly, if you could. Do you think Bradley Roby is on the New Orleans Saints for the entirety, start to finish, of the 2022 NFL season?
Yes, I think he will be on the roster in 2022. It's next offseason that will be the big question.
Ross, this is always fun with you, man. Could you let everybody know where they can follow you on Twitter and then catch everything you're doing?
Absolutely. You can find the Locked On Saints podcast every Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube. You can head over to saintswire.usatoday.com to find all the written work. And of course, you can find all of that in one place over at Ross Jackson, NOLA, NOLA on Twitter.
People think that I talk fast when I'm on the podcast. I know I talk fast at times. Once I get going and I get rolling, it's like the Energizer Bunny. Sometimes it just never stops. Ross talks faster than me. I've listened to Ross's intros. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how Ross is so busy. I don't know how Ross is able to keep everything in his brain. One thing I do know is that I do enjoy having Ross on the podcast. I think you guys do as well. Unfortunately, the end is here. Ross, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
I'll miss you. Thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you. Always a pleasure to be here.